Welcome, dear audience at home, to this special IMPAKT online event, Cyborg Futures, with Neil Harbisson. My name is Arjon.
And my name is Michelle, and I would like to start with a question. Would you share your deepest feelings and desires with a cyborg? This is not a question from some science fiction fantasy. In the future, the boundaries between man and machine will be more and more blurred, as we will see tonight from a special guest. So implanted antennas, bionic limbs, self-learning robots, these are just a tip of the iceberg we call Cyborg Futures.
So what awaits us in this future where man and machine merge? To research this question, we produced a special web project, Cyborg Futures, Who Wants to Live Forever? And for this web project, we invited many artists and speakers. And before we join the lecture with our special guest of tonight, Neil Harbisson, we'd like to take you on a small tour through this web project.
So this is what you see when you type cyborg.impact.nl. We have different artworks, interviews, mini lectures from different artists and speakers. To name a few, we have from Stellark, Klazien van de Zandschulp, Ali El Sami, Lance Maat, Simon Dogger, Monobanda, and 1 Seconds.
And we invited special people. We invited a few people to give a special lecture. The already mentioned Stellark, but also Anna Gimbrère joined us for a lecture. And Anna Gimbrère is a Dutch science journalist, and she approached the issue from a science philosophical perspective.
Another one we can really recommend is the one with a long title, What the First 10,000 Years Tell Us. And then I stopped reading, from Joanna Bryson. She's a British professor of ethics and technology. And in her lecture, she focused on artificial intelligence, the relationship between human and technology, and robot ethics.
So, most important now for this evening is, of course, our guest Neil Harbisson. His lecture will also be added to the web project tonight, after the event, of course. If you want to ask questions for Neil Harbisson, you can use the email address questions@impact.nl. After the lecture, Neil will join us for a Q&A, an interview and a Q&A, where we can hand your questions over to him to respond to. But now, without any further ado, please let's watch Neil Harbisson and his lecture.
Hello everyone at IMPAKT. My name is Neil Harbisson, and years ago I decided to merge with technology in order to extend my perception of reality. I co-created and had this antenna implanted inside my head so I could perceive more colors than a visual spectrum of a human eye. The antenna allows me to sense the vibrations of colors from infrareds to ultraviolet. There's also internet connection, so I can receive colors directly into my head from other sensors. And I feel that this antenna is not a device, not a wearable, but a new body part, an extension of my senses and an extension of my body. That's why I define myself as a cyborg, because I don't feel that I'm using or wearing technology. I feel that I am technology. This system, I would classify it as AS, not AI. I don't see it as artificial intelligence because the antenna is not giving me the information or the intelligence. The antenna is not telling me which color I have in front. It's not saying blue, yellow, pink. The antenna is simply allowing me to sense the vibrations of color, and then it's up to my brain to create intelligence or not. So I see it as an artificial sense that allows me to extend my perception of reality. And then if you merge with an artificial sense, the intelligence might happen after a while. Your brain might slowly create intelligence from this stimuli from the outside. So I see this as a different branch of technology. One thing is AI, where if you merge with it, the intelligence is given to you by the machine. And the other branch is AS, artificial senses. If you merge with them, the intelligence will slowly be created by your own brain. Also, the reality that this type of system creates, I wouldn't see it as virtual reality or augmented reality. I like to see it as revealed reality. this type of technology allows us to reveal elements that already exist. In my case, infrareds, the color spectrum, and ultraviolets are elements that exist around me, but that my body can't sense. So technology is allowing me to reveal these elements that already exist around us. So it's revealed reality. I'm not the only one doing this. There's also a woman called Moon Ribas. She had 2 implants in her feet for around 7 years that allowed her to feel the vibrations of the earth. So she had 2 seismic sensors in her feet, and whenever there was an earthquake in the world, she could feel a vibration in her feet. So her sense of movement and vibrations also changed since she had these implants. Together with Moon Ribas, we both created the Cyborg Foundation 10 years ago with 3 aims. One was to help other people extend their senses by merging with technology, so help other people become cyborgs. Also promote this as a social and art movement. And the third is defend cyborg rights. We think that cyborg rights is something that governments should start talking about. And that's why, together with Rich McKinnon a few years ago, we presented a proposal with some cyborg civil rights. And we've been exposing them to several government summits. And the rights basically expose the redefinition and defense of cyborg civil liberties and foresees a battle for the ownership, licensing, and control of new organs and sensory implants. The first basic right that we presented is the freedom of morphology. Freedom of morphology is basically that a person shall be free to express themselves through temporary or permanent adaptations, alterations, modifications, or augmentations to their bodies. And similarly, a person shall be free from involuntary morphological changes. Basically, that we should be allowed to decide which senses and organs we want to have, that we should be free to decide how we want to have our bodies, which organs we want to have, and which senses. Now it's quite complex. In my case, for example, this antenna was not allowed to be implanted in my head. So I presented the antenna surgery to a bioethical committee, and they said it was not ethical to have this antenna implanted in my head. Basically, they said that it was not ethical because it went beyond human perception. Sensing infrareds and ultraviolets is not human perception, so they said it was not ethical. The second reason, because it's not a traditional organ, it's not a traditionally human organ to have an antenna. If it had been an arm or a leg, they would have found it ethical. And the third reason, they were extremely worried about the image the hospital would have if someone came out with an antenna. So they didn't accept the surgery as ethical, and this made it very difficult for me to be free to decide how I wanted to have my body and my sensory perception. So the surgery had to be done with an anonymous doctor, and this is something that we think shouldn't happen, so that surgeries should be allowed and that we should be free to decide which type of morphology and sensory system we want to live with. The second right is the right to bodily sovereignty. Basically, a person is entitled to dominate any type of intelligence and its activities within the person's body and its domain, whether they are acting as permanent residents, visitors, registered aliens, trespassers, insurgents, or invaders. Basically, here we're saying that if, for example, your organ has internet connection, in my case, my antenna has internet connection, I should have the right to decide who is allowed to enter my body. Having internet in the body means that I can be easily hacked, or that someone could send colors, in my case, directly into my head without permission. So there are no rights defending who is entitled to do so and what happens if someone hacks me. Through all these years, I've only been physically hacked once. So a few years ago, someone without permission sent colors to my head. So I was physically hacked once. In my case, I enjoyed it. It was interesting and fun. But if it hadn't been interesting and fun, then I don't know, there's no laws protecting me from this, and governments should start dealing with this. Some citizens have internet as part of their system, as part of their body, and most laws are about humans and about technology. There are no laws regarding humans that are technology, and in the future there'll be more and more citizens that have the internet not that use the internet not as a tool or a communication system, but the internet is becoming a sense. So humans that have internet as a sense need to be protected. Another right is the freedom from disassembly. A person shall be free from unnecessary search, seizure, suspension, or interruption or function, detachment, dismantling, or disassembly without due process. Basically, no one should be allowed to remove my antenna or any other implant or new body part that anyone has. Through all these years, since 2004, I've been walking around the streets with an antenna. I've been attacked several times. People who've tried to pull the antenna and remove it. The serious attack was in 2011 when 3 policemen tried to remove the antenna from my head because they thought I was filming them. The antenna was damaged, so they broke the tip of the antenna. And obviously, if this went on trial, probably the judge would consider it damage to property and not physical aggression, and this should be changed. Once we consider these implants as body parts, anyone that tries to attack the new organ or remove it should be considered physical aggression, not damage to property. So no one should be allowed to remove our organs. Another one is another right is equality for mutants. Basically, that a legally recognized mutant shall enjoy all the rights, benefits, and responsibilities extended to natural persons. So all cyborgs are equal to non-cyborgs. That we should be treated as equal, no matter how many organs or senses a person has or doesn't have. We should all be treated as equal. I had a problem with this. In 2004, I wasn't allowed to renew my UK passport because officials said that there was a problem with my photo. Basically, there was a problem with my head, that you're not allowed to appear in UK passport office with electronic equipment. So I replied saying that what they were seeing in the picture was not an electronic equipment, but a new body part. I told them that I defined myself as a cyborg and that they should consider the antenna as part of my body, not as a device. And they said no. So it became a battle. They kept insisting that I should remove or hide the antenna. And I kept insisting that the antenna was part of my body and therefore part of my image. And in the end, they accepted this and they allowed me to appear in the passport. But this was in 2004. 10 years later, in 2014, I had to renew my passport and the same thing happened. So I had the same problem. So I'm sure that other people with new organs and senses will face similar problems. In this case, it's a very small issue. It's just it's a passport. But in other cases, we might not be treated as equal. Also in the future, if the majority of society is cyborg, we need to be careful it doesn't happen the opposite, that humans are treated or non-cyborgs are treated differently. So that's extremely important, that we should all be seen as equals and that technology shouldn't create inequality, because that's one of the dangers that we face in the future. Technology could create inequality, but we must fight for it not to happen. One thing is diversity. That's for sure going to happen, and we should embrace it, that we will have many people with organs and senses that are not traditionally human, and this will create a diversity in society that will be much greater than what we now call diversity. We will meet people with senses and organs that are not traditionally human, but we must embrace diversity, but try to avoid and stop inequality. We should all be treated equal. The other right is right to organic naturalization. Basically, a person shall be free from exploitative or injurious third-party ownerships. A person is entitled to own third-party properties permanently integrated within a body. Basically, I've met some people that have implants and that these implants do not belong to them. This is something that I found shocking. But some people, for example, with cochlear implants, which are implants for deaf people, they don't have enough money to pay for the whole system, so they keep paying it month per month. During this period, the implant is not theirs, it's a company's. It doesn't belong to them. So in any case, in the future, whenever in the future we might find companies selling organs and senses, we must be sure that anyone with these implants is allowed to own this organ and sense if they want, obviously, and which I'm sure that everyone will want to own their own implants. So this is something that for us at the Cyborg Foundation is really important. That's why we all the systems that we create are open source, so that anyone with implants can actually modify them and control them. Because the aim is that you should be in control of your own implants and systems that you decide to incorporate in your body. So basically, Moon Ribas and I created this platform, the Cyborg Foundation, also to help other people become cyborgs. And through all these years, there's been many more, like Manel de Aguas. He has 2 implants in his side, at the side, to feel the weathers. He has 2 weather stations, and this allows him to feel temperature, humidity, and pressure, so he can feel the weather in a very specific way. We also created Retroception Perception, which is sensors here that allow you to feel if there's presence behind you. So it gives you retroception. You can feel if someone is behind. We also created a sensor that allows you to feel the magnetic north. So if you move, I have it in my knee, implanted at the back of my knee. So if I face north, I feel something pushing me to the north. So this is something that many species have. There's been several projects. We all see these projects as artistic and experimental, but that doesn't mean that it can be used for other means. Like my antenna could be used for blind people. So if someone is blind, he or she could use the antenna to sense presence around him. Also, the retroception earrings that allow you to feel what's behind could also be used for blind people to sense presence around. We also created a system of communication also as an art project, which basically is a tooth implanted in my mouth that when I clicked, Moon would receive a vibration in her tooth. So we both had tooth implanted with a button and a vibration, and then we both learned the Morse code. So depending on the rhythm and the words that we would click, we would be able to communicate from mouth to mouth through Morse code. So it actually worked through Bluetooth. So it was a Bluetooth tooth that allowed us to communicate from mouth to mouth. And we saw this as an art project. But if someone was completely paralyzed, for example, and could not communicate but could move the mouth, this person could also use the system to communicate via Bluetooth tooth, basically. So we see all these projects as art, but we understand that they all have some social consequences. In the future, we will probably see cyborg clinics, which is something that will change radically the way we see all these projects. Now, these projects are, in some cases, illegal or illegal. They're not even considered illegal because no one has actually talked about it. So we are now having these trans-species surgeries, which is basically adding organs and senses that are not traditionally human in spaces that are a bit clandestine, like underground. It's an underground movement, a minority. But whenever cyborg clinics start appearing, where you can officially go somewhere and have a new organ and a new sensor system implanted, I think things will radically change, and we'll start seeing companies offering technological implants, startups that will sell new sensors and new organs, and university careers that will basically start teaching species design. So this is, I think, a future that is not too far away, and I think we shouldn't see it as a dangerous step. I think it's a natural one. We've always been transspecies. If we look at the evolution of life, we weren't always human. I think we started being bacteria, then we kept evolving into different type of forms and shapes, and now we are human. But this is just temporary. We are now in a crucial moment in history where we can actually decide which path to take, which senses and organs we want to have as a species. So I think it's an exciting moment, and also it's becoming easier and easier to create these organs and sensors. Back in 2004, this was very strange. Creating this system was also complex, big, but now we have lots of systems that allow, like 3D printers that allow us to create the organs much smaller with biocompatible materials. And in the future, we'll be able to 3D print these organs with our own DNA. So, well, I think it will slowly become easier to create your own perception of reality and to create your own new organs.
Hi Neil, welcome back.
Do we have audio from Neil?
Let me see. Do we hear
Hello,
you?
hello?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah, we can hear you.
Great.
Thanks for being with us. So we got actually, be prepared. We got a lot of questions from the audience. So we'll pass a few questions on to you. Maybe there's some things that you want to say first, or should we just dive directly into the questions?
Yeah, let's try.
Good. So thank you so much for this presentation. It's a very creative take on cyber, but also a lot about rights and legislation. So we have one very interesting question from Jens Olsen. Thank you for your question. New laws are mostly reactive rather than proactive. How do you think government will be able to cope with the rapid developments within the cyborg community?
I think it will be through individual cases mostly. They will be faced by citizens that are technology and that they face some issues with laws and regulations, and they will have to solve them one by one. I think that's how it will slowly change, because I don't see governments creating regulations before things happen. I think they need to be faced with reality, and they need to be faced with citizens that have merged with technology and who are struggling with some issues. And it might start with very simple issues, and it might end up with being very more common issues with more people and more. Yeah, especially I think especially with internet as a sense. I think that's a serious issue when the internet becomes part of us, part of the body, not part of our mobile phones. Then we will face some serious issues of privacy.
And we would move from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Humans, where humans are connected. Yeah, that is a scary thought, or how do you see that?
Not scary, exciting. I think it's it will be lost. There will be no humans lost anymore. It will be a thing of the past. These people disappearing will disappear. We will be trackable, and I think you can decide whether or not you don't want to be tracked, or you don't want to be receiving things directly into you. I think that's the issue. We should be able to decide, but if you don't want to be um, lost in an unwired world, then you will also be able to decide this. But I don't see it as scary. I see it as an option that many people will choose to have.
Is there any country in the world that you see as giving a good example in terms of legislation towards our cyborg future?
I think Sweden is open to having citizens that merge with technology. There's even the train system has the option of having the tickets implanted, so you can enter the train system with an implant. There's also many companies in Sweden, but I think that in general it will be a small country that will start legislating strongly, maybe bioethical issues. I think it might be a small country, but maybe Iceland, maybe Monaco, maybe a very small country that we will be surprised, and then it might serve as the others as an example.
And how do you see? I think it was Dubai that recognized robot Sophia. Is that like a publicity hoax, or do you see it as a substantial step in recognizing cyborg entities, or in this case, an artificial intelligence?
Well, Dubai has the minister of well, in the Emirates they have the Ministry of AI, so they are talking a lot about this, and they have their own vision of how the Emirates will be in 2070. So they are a country that is looking forward and planning ahead, whereas in Europe, not as much. But then the present is very different from other countries. They have this duality there, where they have extremely traditional and conservative reality, and then the futuristic look. So there is an unusual feeling of future and a strong contrast. So yeah, I have mixed feelings of the Middle East when it comes to really adapting um, new bodies or new types of beings right now, I guess, in the present. But I'm sure that in the future, that's their aim. Yes, at least that's what they plan.
Michelle, the next question.
Yeah, I think this fits very well, speaking of nation, to a question from Michael Hurtado. If, politically speaking, is a nation of cyborgs possible? Or do we even wish a nation of cyborgs?
Is it
Maybe
desirable,
that could be the question.
I hope not. I think the diversity is what will be best. Nations where there are cyborgs, there are non-cyborgs, there are robots that have their own identity and rights, and also other species. Hopefully, I also hope that during this century we will stop eating other species. So I think it's more of what I hope is a diversity of realities and species and beings, and a respect to all forms of life. So I don't think we will all become cyborgs, but I think we will all have the option of deciding whether or not we want to merge with technology or become cyborgs or not. Yeah.
Then we have quite some questions that deal with the freedom, or actually where you draw the boundary. I think there is also a huge topic, very interesting one. I will take one that summarizes from Lily, this one. Do you think there are some kind of extension that everyone not must but should have? And where do you draw the line when you think of like having to have this kind of extensions?
Must, I would never think of must. I think maybe the must would be that we should all think about it, at least think about which sense we would like to have, or organ we would like to have. But I don't think there is a must. But I think maybe we will, if there is a major, I think we will use bone as an input, bone conduction as an input, as a permanent input. Because now, for example, for listening to music, for listening to a telephone call, we are blocking our sense of hearing, whereas we could have a third input through bone conduction. In the same case that in my case, the antenna is not blocking my sense of hearing. I can hear color without having to block my sense of hearing. This same system could be used for just telephone calls, or for example, or just music. So I could be listening to what I hear around me, and I could have a third ear that would only allow me to receive things from the internet or from any other device. So I think maybe one implant that will be used in the near future by many people, I think, is a bone conducted ear, and this will create new types of music created for bone conduction, which will be different because bone conduction allows you to hear more than air conduction, so you can create music with more frequencies, and it will be more profound. And then also, we won't have to use air conduction in concerts, or it can be silent. I mean, the problems in many cities are noise, and this could be easily avoided by having bone conducted inputs. So I think that might be, by maybe telephone companies will in the near future propose this type of communication.
But the benefit you see is that people would be able to handle two signals at the same time, as I understand it. But okay, then your ears can handle audio input and your bones can handle input. But would your brain also be able to handle the two at the same time?
Yes. Just some people might need some time of adaptation, but yes, it's yes. I mean, maybe if you're listening to music through bone conduction and someone's talking to you, your brain will decide which one to focus on. Not, it won't be a thing about the. It won't be like, it's the brain who will decide, not the system, basically. So you might have 20 sensory inputs, and then your brain decides in the same way that we do with our existing senses. We don't just have 5 senses, we have many more, like sense of balance, sense of time, sense of common sense. There's many senses, and then depending on what we're doing, our brain decides which sense to focus on, and that will be something that we will easily learn which input to focus on.
So we have a lot of political, philosophical questions from the audience, but also some very down to earth about the practical aspects, and some even skeptical. I'll try to cluster them, and let's see what you can respond to them. It's F. van Brummelen who asked, as a skeptic, how would you prove to others that you have these senses? How do you take care of the entry point? What happened when you were hacked? What was the sensation? What would one do with your remains? Like, is it going to be buried, cremated with you? Another question is, let me see, Casey Hofland. If you have 5 Lego blocks where 3 are of the same color, can you tell me which 3 are the same color? Maybe that's a nice opportunity to explain a bit better what exactly this extra sense brings to you, like which kind of additional sensations you can perceive with them. And there's Annalie Bruns who wants to know, how do you take care of your antenna and how do you clean it?
Well, the first question, in 2004, most people thought it was not true, that I could listen, that this was not possible, that I could listen to colors was a lie. So if people would ask me what the antenna was, I would tell them it's to hear color, and most people thought it was a lie. Through the years, people started not thinking it was a lie, thought it was strange, and then people started believing it was true. And I guess there will always be people who don't believe that, almost anything is possible with technology. Even with very simple tools, you can create amazing senses and sensory input. So all the systems that we create are open source, so anyone can create them. They're not secret inventions. They are open source, so anyone can recreate them, and anyone can have them implanted. Everything is explained. There's many documentaries explaining in detail what it is. So to accept, I think there's less and less. When it comes to the other question, which was
Well, it was about the
framework.
Lego blocks. Maybe you can explain what extra components to the spectrum, the visual spectrum, the antenna is adding.
Well, the antenna allows me to sense more colors than a human eye, so it goes beyond human perception. It allows me to sense specifically all the degrees of hue and then different volumes depending on different saturations. So it's very specific. The thing is, I wanted to sense color as a dominant thing. So when I enter a room, or if I look at the three dominoes at the beginning, I will sense the dominant color of the three dominoes or the three Lego pieces. And then if I get close, I will be able to hear the subtle differences between each Lego. Even when I listen to people's eyes, the left eye and the right eye will usually sound slightly different because they're not exactly the same color. So yes, it can be extremely specific because through sound you can differentiate more specific and subtle changes than through the eye. So actually, hearing color allows you to be much more specific. And the other question,
Does it need cleaning or maintenance? And how do you clean or maintain it?
just like any other body part, yes, it's waterproof, so I can clean it. Also, you need to be careful with infection because this is an open wound. It goes in the skeleton, so there's a part where the antenna comes out from my skull. It goes through the skin. There's a part where the hair was removed to avoid infection. But one of the main issues when you have an implant that is trespassing the skin is infection. So you need to be careful with keeping it clean.
Michelle, you take the next question, or shall I
Yes, we have an interesting question here from Daniel Reus about the freedom, the paradox, let's say, about the freedom to modify your body that you were talking about in your lecture versus the freedom not to have any body modifications. As explained, we can imagine that eventually people with modified bodies will have more apt bodies for a certain type of jobs, for instance. They might become more privileged. How do you deal with that, and how do you keep? How can you still speak of freedom when eventually it becomes so obvious that you almost have to be modified to function in society or to?
Well, it's exactly the same with education. Education should be available to everyone because people who go to university or have or learn more languages, they probably will have more options to have a specific job. So as long as having new senses are available to anyone, even not implanted, wearable, or using tools like now we are using already many tools in many jobs. You need to have certain skills, computer skills, or you need to be able to use certain machines to be able to have that job. It's just the same. You don't have to modify your own body to have a new sense specifically. This is just if you want to have it permanently, but for specific jobs, if you only want to have the sense from 8 till 5, you can wear the sense probably. So you don't necessarily need to have. But this is an issue that really concerns us. That having new senses should be something that everyone should be able to access, and it's happening. It's not rich people who are becoming cyborgs. It's university students or even secondary school students who are actually creating the senses and creating also the biocompatible materials to adapt it to their own bodies. So we are seeing that it's not the rich who are creating all this. It's actually people who are interested in modifying themselves. And
But if
now that we have, yes, yeah, it's becoming cheaper and easier to do it.
But if it's available to everyone, it might also become obligatory or feel obligatory. I mean, if you don't take that extension, don't take that cyborg technology, you might be deemed to be less qualified to do a certain job. What happens to the people that, for whatever personal reasons, do not want to have any cyborg extensions to their body?
I would say exactly it's the same with cars, with any other like education. People who don't want to study, what do we do? Or people who don't want to have a mobile phone, people who don't want to have an email address, what do we do? I mean, obviously there are people who won't and who don't, and they they yes, I mean, it will happen, but it's not something new. It's something that it's inevitable. Not everyone will want the same in any circumstance, in any subject, in any situation. So yeah, we should all be treated equally. People who don't want to merge with technology, I'm sure there'll be other options without needing to have these implants.
Still, but to me, there's like a basic difference between not wanting to study or not wanting to wear cyborg technologies. I think you can expect people to study and to improve themselves and their knowledge if they want to get forward in life. I think that's a fair expectation that society can have from people. But I don't think it's a fair expectation if society would expect from you that you would have a certain kind of extension to your body. How do you see that difference, or do you think it's the same kind of logic behind it?
Well, learning a new language is an extension. It's an extension that takes years, years and years of effort, whereas an implant is usually less. But um, yeah, I mean, I don't see the creation of new senses as a new problem. There will always be people who will not want to do what most people will maybe eventually want to do. In the same way that I know people who don't have mobile phone and they don't have email either, and they have they've decided not to, and they are happy not having it. So I think the main issue is that people should be free to decide, and not for other, like there's not an issue of money. That's the or an issue of accessibility. I think the issue should be just because they don't want to. That's then they are free not to merge with technology or not to have new senses if they don't want to.
There's a question from Glenn van Lierop, and I think a lot of the issues in a question we already addressed, but she ends with how it was possible that someone hacked your antenna. Maybe you could explain a bit about that. What exactly happened on this one occasion when your antenna was hacked?
I was in Al Jazeera television station in Washington, and I had to connect my antenna to the Wi-Fi of the television station. So I wasn't using my own Wi-Fi connection. I was using the television station connection. So someone in the office or in the building knew something or knew that I was using this, and then this person dragged an image into my head, because you can find me on Bluetooth if I connect to. I mean, it's not such a secure system that I have. My head has Bluetooth connection that I use to connect to my Wi-Fi connection. But in that case, I didn't use my Wi-Fi. I used the television station, and then he sent or she sent an image to my head.
Super.
How do you see, because then I'm thinking also of viruses. We have one, a pandemic at the moment. But how do you see the future of these kind of cyber attacks or viruses and the like? Do you think that is a real danger that people will seriously, I don't know, attack the cyborgs or?
Totally. Yes, I think we will have a cybernetic pandemic, and what we are now seeing organically will happen in the future cybernetically, and it will have worse consequences, most probably. Yes, if we now have a computer virus, it will not only stop many hospitals and traffic controls working, it will, many things will crash. Also, people who are merged with technology will feel the consequences. So this is something that we need to be prepared, because I think it might have worse consequences.
Um, One question I have is, I mean, your work, how you deal with your work, also Moon, Ribas, it's very much like a hands-on, personal, artistic approach to this kind of technology. If we look at other technologies, and they're usually really in the hands of big technology companies. If you would now imagine future developments, how do we make sure that it is us people that are kind of controlling this and being involved in it, and not so much bigger technology companies that kind of formulate what this technology should be for us, give it to us in a convenient way, but we would lose control over it. So how do you see a future of us keeping agency over cyborg technologies?
Yeah, I think in the future there will be the two options. People will be able to buy new organs or new senses, but then there will be the option of creating it yourself, which is something that more DIY, in the same way that, I guess, I was gonna compare it with IKEA, but it's not comparable. But I think maybe more like, but it's difficult because we're talking about things that will be part of your own body. So it's not so easy to have something that will work for everyone. It's the same with plastic surgery. You don't have like a place where you can just buy the. They need to be done specifically for your own body. Most implants. So in the same with teeth or teeth implants, you don't just buy them in a shop and then you have them implanted. They need to be done specifically for your own body. Also, if we're creating sensors for specific brains, I mean, each brain works slightly differently, so the same system won't work for all brains. So I don't think it we can compare it with anything we've seen before. The whole world of creating new organs and senses will be a new one that will be more into the direction of DIY than big companies selling something like a phone that anyone can use, because we all have more or less the same fingers. It's 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 more complex, and people will, if they have the option of being part of the design of their own perception, I'm sure they will be willing to be part of their own perception, designing their own perception.
So imagine you could work with any kind of big tech producer or any kind of major scientific lab to work on your next cyborg body extension. What would Neil Harbisson's next extension be, and which company would you work with?
I would work with teenagers because I trust their passion, and they are already, they are merged with technology. Psychologically, they are cyborgs. They don't see the difference between a world without technology and a world with technology. They are already psychologically merged with technology in a way that merging biologically seems so natural that I would probably choose collaboration with 21st century humans or people, basically, and not with a big company, and senses that are challenging, senses that, like creating, for example, an organ for the sense of humor, or creating some systems that allow us to change our society in a good way, like night vision, which would mean that we wouldn't have to use lights at night, and we wouldn't have to waste energy, or creating systems that allow us to control our own temperature so that we don't need to use heaters or air conditionings. Things that are either poetic or environmentally good for the future of our planet and for the future of our species.
And so, speaking about different kind of implants, what do you think if the implant can also apply pain or influence your cognition? I mean, we are talking all the examples that you gave also during the presentation. I found it quite striking that they're all very sensory. They're all about the senses and less about what we usually think with cyborgs, which is a little bit more disembodied maybe, or AI kind of idea. So that is very interesting. So if we think about these other types that can take control or block movement, for instance, where do you think that this can go, and where do you draw the line?
Yeah, the thing is that everything that is cognitive comes through our senses. So I really focus always on sensing, because when we sense, all these sensory input will become cognition. So whereas if you go straight to cognition, then you're giving the machine the right to give you the knowledge and the intelligence without being processed by your own brain. And I think it's essential that we use our brain. I think that's the magic of the word cyborg. It's cybernetic and organism. It's not just a machine telling you what to do or what to think. So I think I would still just focus on senses and insist that senses can give us everything. And sensing knowledge is something that we shouldn't skip. Because then the beauty of sensing things is that we will have different types of knowledge and different types of cognitive experiences, and this is what will enrich us as a society. If we all have the same AI telling us the same thing, there's no diversity in thoughts. We will all think what the machine is telling us, and that's not something I'm interested in, and I don't think we should. I think we should focus on AS, which is artificial senses, and not so much on AI. If I had to choose in something related to AI, maybe it would be languages. If we could just have the fast ability to use a system that quickly translates, which is already existing through Google Translate, or this system can be used so that languages don't die. So if I could now be speaking to you in Catalan, in my mother tongue, so my language would be still alive. I wouldn't have to skip to English. You could speak in Dutch and Flemish. We could speak your own language, and that would allow us to contribute in the preservation of languages, which is something that allows us to also look at things in a different way, because each language allows us to look at things in a different way. So if I had to choose of a cognitive thing, it would be a language, I guess.
I think we're getting close towards the end of the broadcast. Maybe a few more questions. One from Kai Salis. Takes us to the beginning maybe, and that's why I find it interesting. And she's wondering, what made you want to have this antenna? So how did this whole process start? When did you first have the idea of making the antenna like you have now? And then she asked more things about what is your favorite color? Or maybe you could tell us about the most amazing experience that you had with the antenna and the added sensory experiences that it gives you.
Well, the reason why I ended up with an antenna implanted in my head was not. It was a very natural process. It wasn't like a sudden idea. I was studying music, experimental music, and I was asked to use technology in music, but it had to be experimental. So I realized that many tools were already being used in music. I was always interested in color because I was born completely colorblind. I knew there were theories about color and sound, like Isaac Newton had already created this system or theory relating each color of the rainbow to a musical note. So it was a combination of different things that made me collaborate with Adam Montandon, a student of the university as well, and we created a system that basically allowed me to hear the sounds of color, and this would allow me to compose music with this system. But this system was not practical for me to use with my hand, so I thought it would be better to stick it in my head. So I sticked it in my head, and then I started hearing colors with the system in 2003, stuck to the head, and then I liked it so much that I thought it would be great if we could have this implanted here as a third eye. So my first aim was to create a third eye in the middle of my forehead that would allow me to sense the vibrations of color through sound. But then I realized that with this would limit my color perception to what I have in front. So looking at nature, I saw there's many organs that humans don't have. One of them is an antenna, which basically allows you to sense 360 degrees. I can be sensing the colors up here while I'm looking here. I can sense the colors behind. So I thought the best would be to have an antenna implanted in my head that allows me to sense color independently. So to me, it felt just a normal creative process, and it became an art project, but also a personal life project. And then when I went out in the streets, I realized it was not only an art project; it was a social one, and it actually is an art form that has an extremely strong social aspect, because it's not just uh, it touches a lot of subjects. So that's how I ended up with an antenna
Mhm.
in the head. And I don't know,
Maybe
in a context of art, it seemed normal, but like experimental art.
maybe related to this, as an artist and as an activist, because you're also mentioning the social aspect. How important is it that it is visible? Would it have the same effect and the same strength as a project if it was a hidden um, part or antenna?
The thing is that some sensory inputs cannot be hidden, because in my color is outside. Like in the case of taste, our sense of taste can be hidden because you can put the food in your mouth, but our sense of sight the eye needs to be visible, otherwise the light won't come in. And in the sense of color, it needs to be outside as well, because otherwise color won't enter. So whereas other senses, like sensing earthquakes that Munri has, they're completely implanted. You don't see the sensors, because she doesn't need to have them outside. So not all sensory organs need to be visible, others must or need to be. And in my case, if it needs to be outside, I don't need to hide it. I don't need to be hiding that I have a new sense, because if I do, it's worse. In 2009, for example, I tried to hide it because I was uncomfortable by the social reaction, because from 2004 till 2009, it was very intense. I I couldn't deal with such interruptions of my daily life by people asking what it was. So I tried to hide it, and it became even worse, because then people thought I was spying, I was hiding something, I was trying to do something spooky. So I realized that it was better not to hide it, and if I have a new sense, I don't need to hide it, and that's why I make it as comfortable as possible. And to me, having the antenna in such a way is as comfortable, because I can, yeah, to me this is, I search now for comfortable, not for whatever the image might be.
That makes me wonder, did it change your social life? I mean, did you become more of a recluse? I mean, you mentioned having this period in your life that you wanted to hide it, and now in everyday social exchange, how is it affecting that kind of social interaction, friends, relationships?
It's constant interaction with strangers. So I have all type of reactions. In one street, I might have people laughing at me and staring at me, and pointing at me, and then people admiring what it is because they've read about it. So I can have both reactions in 1 minute, or people who come and ask what it is. But it's interesting to see how social reaction keeps changing. Like in 2004, most people thought it was a reading light, so they would ask me if I could turn on the light. In 2005, people thought it was a microphone, because there were many internet cafes that have had flexible microphones. In 2007 and 8, people thought it was a hands-free telephone, because taxi drivers started having hands-free telephones, so they thought it was a new type of telephone. In 2009, people thought it was a GoPro cam, that I was filming my life, so people would wave at me thinking that I was filming. In 2012, 13, people thought I had something to do with Google Street View and that I was streaming the streets. In 2016, no, in 2015, children asked me if it was a selfie stick attached to my head. In 2016, many people shouted at me Pokemon and they tried to catch me. And now lately, some people just make fun and they pretend this is some kind of gel that you can wash your hands with. I mean, it's so many interesting thoughts of what the antenna could be.
Yeah, it's nice how your antenna also is kind of a guide through technological advancements over the past decade. Is there anything, Neil, thanks for being with us and sharing all these nice stories, but also thoughts about our technological future. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us or say?
No, I think we touched a lot of subjects. But yeah.
Oh, thanks. Great that you were with us and with our audience. Thanks, audience, for all your questions. Sorry for those who did not see their questions included in the conversation with Neil. I think we have a few practical things. Well, you can see the cyborg.impact.nl address where you can see Neil's lecture. Actually, we'll upload it probably tomorrow, but soon the lecture, if you want to rewatch it, you can see it on the web project, as well as other speakers that we invited. Soon we'll have a presentation with Dutch philosophy scientist Peter Paul Verbeek, professor. That will be the next event in our series Cyborg Futures.
You can already find it on the website. So if you're interested, he's a professor of ethics and technology, and he will talk about the history of the relationship between man and technology. So it's a very interesting lecture, starting from a very special viewpoint that we are all and always have been cyborgs. So that's a starting point. So that is in 2 weeks. And now I think we can
say goodbye to Neil. Thanks, Neil, for being with us. Thanks all the viewers at home, and hope to see you at the next IMPAKT event.